Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode, I take a look at the 2019 straight-to-Netflix film Iron Sky: The Coming Race. It is a sequel to 2012's Iron Sky. It is a parody, a satire, a comedy, a sci-fi action adventure, a whole bunch of crazy nonsense put together, and it is, well, very hard to explain what this movie is, but let's just say it has a 29% on the tomato meter and a 32% on the audience score. Not very high numbers, incredibly low numbers on both of those meters, and that's because this came straight to Netflix recently in 2019. The first movie from 2012 isn't exactly a big blockbuster, well-known film, but it is a campy kind of cult favorite amongst a lot of people. And looking back at that 2012 film, we have a better chance of explaining exactly what Iron Sky is really about. Iron Sky is off the premise that sometime before the end of World War II, the Nazis, using some kind of superior German technology, they escaped onto a base on the far side of the moon. And they spent the next few decades, all the way up into modern times, hiding out in this lunar moon base and developing superior technology so that they can retake the Earth for the Third Reich in the future. And it's completely crazy. It's a completely wacky, way out there premise. And in 2012, it had a limited run in the theaters and then went straight to video after that. And it kind of generated a buzz. It was very unique. It was strange. It was a blend of parody, satire, and, some kind of actual kind of a big budget sci-fi action adventure. So it was like a B movie, but the budget was just too high to give it a B movie look. It actually looks like something that shouldn't be a B movie. And yet the premise is so crazy, and the stuff that they throw in there to make fun of, it's making fun of modern society basically, is so wacky. And if you have the right sense of humor, you'll find it hysterical and something you can watch multiple times. If you don't have the right sense of humor, if you try to take it serious, or you're not aware that it's just a tongue-in-cheek kind of look at our modern world, then you'll think it's complete crap and you'll wonder why anybody made it. Now, what I just talked about was the 2012 film Iron Sky. Now, of course, it needed a sequel. I mean, let's take a look at Iron Sky from 2012. 39% on the tomato meter, with only 41 actual critic reviews, 37% on the audience score with 10,000 plus a few more audience reviews. Still very low numbers, but this was well known for what it was back in the day, and I enjoyed it. I found it so weird I couldn't stop watching it, and the budget was simply high enough that it was just fascinating to see somebody's interpretation of how Nazis might have survived on the moon all those centuries, and what would they be up to, and what kind of technology were they using exactly. So anyway, let's not talk too much about the 2012 film now that we know what I'm talking about, this Iron Sky universe of sorts. Let's take a look at the 2019 straight to Netflix film. 7 critic reviews and 53 on the audience score. Now, I'm going to go through these audience scores, and if I run out of things to talk about, then I'm prepared to switch over to a backup site that you might have heard of called IMDb, that has a whole lot of more reviews than Rotten Tomatoes does. And we'll use that if we run out of stuff to talk about here. But as this is a Rotten review, let's get right into the audience reviews. Iron Sky: The Coming Race. The top review is actually from 4 days ago, making that I don't know, December 26th of 2019, half a star. I can sit through most any movie, but this was garbage. It is a stupid premise smothered in terrible jokes. It reeks of lousy attempts at being clever. Also bad acting. Most of the time I welcome bad acting in an ironic comedy, but this was the other kind of bad acting, the kind you feel embarrassed for the actors when witnessing. I don't agree with that. I didn't think that acting was bad. Certainly by B-movie standards, the acting was just fine. I thought the opening voiceover narration from the female main character was a little bit off, and it wasn't funny, and it was a little too serious, but a little bit weird. I thought the opening narration should have been done better, but once I got past that, I completely enjoyed this for what it was because I knew what it was. I knew this was going to be some crazy satire on a whole bunch of things thrown in there. And I had seen the poster, which features, among other things, Adolf Hitler riding a Tyrannosaurus. It's that crazy, but it is quite strange. And I found this entertaining just to watch through this whole thing and take a look at the crazy parodies and characters they threw in here to make fun of real life characters, and they had no shame. They made fun of historical figures that are, long deceased. They make fun of ones that are just recently deceased that we know very well, and they didn't really care if anybody was offended. And I kind of appreciated that, and I just kept watching all the way to the end to see how crazy it would get. If I had to give this a star rating on this Iron Sky: The Coming Race, the sequel, I would say I would give this 2 stars because it is just so crazy. I couldn't stop watching it, and it kind of disappointed. I was expecting a little more based on a sequel to the first one, but it wasn't totally terrible. Just a little bit disappointing compared to the first one. And please don't do yourself a crime and don't hurt yourself and try to watch this one not knowing what it's about and not having seen the first one. You really do need to see the first one to understand what the hell's going on in this one. It's not one of those films that gives you stuff to catch you up as a new viewer. You're going to need to see the first one. If you haven't, well, you're going to be just shaking your head wondering what's going on because it expects that you've seen the first one at least once. Let's move on. 5 days ago, 2.5 stars. Terrible pass of time, but I love the parodies of Jobs and Others. Haha. Watch if you have absolutely nothing better to do. Well, let me just recap the plot real quick. Yes, in the first one, the Nazis went to the moon base and they plotted their takeover of the Earth in the future using a fleet of German scientist engineered UFOs. And I'm not going to spoil the plot and let you know what happened at the end of that, but let's just say at the beginning of this one, the Earth has just been wiped out by a nuclear war, and the survivors are living in that old Nazi moon base on the far side of the moon, and they're kind of running out of resources and supplies and needing to either get off the moon and go somewhere or fix their situation. They're in a desperate situation, and that's how this opens. And these characters, they end up by one means or another, I don't want to completely spoil it, they end up coming back to the Earth, and it is discovered that of all the things you could throw in with this crazy premise, they discover that the Earth is hollow, and inside the Earth is another type of world in which a reptilian race has been living underground this whole time, and they've been impersonating our world leaders and famous historical figures throughout history in a plot to control humans, and their plans have been interrupted by the nuclear war on the surface of the Earth, and so the main characters end up inside this, hollow Earth world, and they encounter, Adolf Hitler and Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and Sarah Palin, who is the president and who was also the president in the first movie. And they don't list her as Sarah Palin, they just list her, if you look at the credits, it'll just say the president, but it is straight up Sarah Palin in her red dress with an accent and everything, and they just have no shame in making fun of current figures and long dead figures. In fact, they even have Margaret Thatcher as one of the reptilian shapeshifters living in the hollow Earth, and there's dinosaurs in there and everything else. And yeah, if you thought Nazis living on the moon and plotting, to take the Earth back over with UFO technology was far out there, well, add in the hollow Earth and dinosaurs and stuff like that, and you can kind of guess what kind of film this is. It's so crazy, you just kind of have to watch the whole thing. And believe it or not, it's actually not low budget. I mean, this looks like as high budget as anything else I've seen in sci-fi in the last few years. In fact, it looks a lot better budget-wise than a lot of straight-to-sci-fi multi-channel stuff. So it's not the budget that makes this rotten. It's just straight up rotten because it doesn't take itself seriously enough to rise up above 1.5 or 2 stars. Not all of the jokes land. Not all of the parody and satire lands correctly. If it did, if you were just laugh out loud, if you were LOLing at this continuously, it would definitely be a fantastic movie. But the humor just doesn't hit right all of the time. And so that allows the more rotten elements to kind of take over. So I'll just say this is still a rotten film, although I enjoyed it enough to watch it all the way from one end to the other. And I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel. At the end of this, it's implied there might be a sequel, and some even crazier stuff's going to happen that I won't spoil. But yeah, I would watch it. If they came out with the third Iron Sky, I would most definitely watch it, give it a chance, because I want to see them outdo themselves. I want to see something crazier. And personally, the first movie was the better of these two, but the second one's worth seeing just to continue the story. And you might find some laughs in some of the figures that they're poking fun on. And let's move on. We have a 4.5-star review, December 16, 2019. So bad it's good. Space Nazis, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sarah Palin all in one movie. And it answers the question of whatever happened to Tom Green. December 5, 2019, 3 stars. Between Sarah Palin, Hitler, Steve Jobs, dinosaurs, the dark side of the moon, the Last Supper, and religious leaders, this movie was so strange. Russia, Earth, the future, maybe even reptilians. Oh my, this movie has it all. Now it all makes sense. Quid pro quo started eons ago. I hope I can sleep now. Ending was fine. The ending song was appropriate. That's all I can say. Yeah, the ending song on this was very appropriate, and it was weird, and it fit perfectly, and I don't know what the hell it was or where it came from. Somebody obviously knows, but just from an artistic stance, wow, these filmmakers knew what they were doing. They set about to create this cheesy thing, and they did a good job, in my opinion. I watched the whole thing, and if it wasn't watchable, believe me, I would have just shut it off or fast forwarded through it. But nope, I sat through this whole thing, and I largely enjoyed what I saw. 5 stars, December 4, 2019. This is the greatest work of cinema since Gone with the Wind, 10 out of 10. I guess if this strikes your sense of humor perfectly, maybe, but most people, I don't think it's going to hit them like that. I'd say 2 stars. This is what this film deserves. Half a star, December 2nd. I cannot believe they were paid to act this badly. The plot was bad, and think Netflix paid too much for this. Well, I can't really say they acted badly. I think that was part of the design. They were trying to act badly, if you will. That's the way I took it. I wasn't offended by the performances at all. I didn't recognize any of the, well, okay, I recognized one of the actors, the one that plays both Hitler, and he plays Hitler's brother, and he was in the first movie. I recognize him from many, many, many movies. I can't recall his name. He's a German. I believe he's German or Swiss, something like that. Austrian, who knows, but in any case, I didn't recognize anybody else in this film, but I thought they were just fine. They did the jobs they were supposed to. They weren't supposed to win Academy Awards. They were supposed to make a satire and a parody, and they did their jobs, in my opinion. Half a star, December 2nd. Okay, I read that one. 3.5 stars, December 2nd. Not exactly sure what I just watched. Basically tries to parody everything. I think it's a lot like watching Snakes on a Plane. Expect nothing. Hope it's as terrible as it sounds, and drink a few shots before you start it, then you'll love it. And who doesn't want to see someone drop kick Hitler while he's riding a T-Rex? Yes, it is funny, and I was completely sober when I watched this film, and it might be advisable to drink a bit before you start this, because maybe I would have found it even funnier. That's quite possible. Half a star, November 29. A Pope said, "Holy shit." That was the only good part. This movie made no sense. Yeah, it had an actual, see, inside the Hollow Earth, there's this reptilian shapeshifter race that lives in there, and lots of world leaders and historical figures have been these shapeshifters. Steve Jobs, the Pope, or at least one of the popes, and also the Prophet Muhammad. He's one of them too. We couldn't leave him out, right? But yeah, you'll have to see it for yourself to know what I'm talking about. November 27, 2019. 1.5 stars. Goofy movie that offers minimal entertainment value. Yeah, I'll agree because it doesn't quite live up to the first one. I thought it would be funnier. I thought with a bigger budget it might, strike people even better, but it was a little bit of a letdown for people that enjoyed the first one. And definitely you need to see the first one or you won't know what the hell's going on here. 2 stars. Like the sci-fi story, but getting real tired of Mary Sue characters. The Mary Sue character, if there is one in this, it's the least of the film's problems. It almost needs a Mary Sue character because it's making fun of things. This is not expected to be a straight up straightforward work of art here. You're supposed to find humor in almost everything going on. 5 stars, November 21st. I enjoyed it a lot. It follows in its predecessor's footsteps of a fun parody film and only leaves one question: what's next? Yeah, it kind of tells you what's going to happen next at the end, but I won't spoil it. 3.5 stars, November 20. Iron Sky is a very surface level comedy about more or less Nazi, space, and conspiracy theories. While it can't be rated seriously, it was enjoyable for a crude comedy. Yes, I agree with that. 2.5 stars. At least it's mixing everything you got digital fun. 0.5 star. For the very first few minutes, I was wondering, why does everyone say this film sucks? Then I kept on watching and kept getting more and more horrified by basically everything. Plot, characters, acting, costumes, scenes, even the jokes are absurd. Save your time, don't watch this. Well, yeah, if this isn't your thing, if you're not expecting this type of thing, your sense of humor isn't there for this, then yeah, this is going to be unwatchable for you. 5 stars, August 25th. Sure, this movie may not be for everyone, but is absurdly fun. I'll agree with that for the most part. 1.5 stars, August 25. Having seen the cult classic that is Iron Sky back in 2012, there was clearly some anticipation when the sequel was announced in 2013, 5 years after the final draft of the script was set to be completed, and Iron Sky: The Coming Race has finally been released. In New Zealand, it is currently only available online and can be found on YouTube Movies. Iron Sky: The Coming Race, I'll refer to it as Iron Sky 2 from now on, is a drastically different movie to its predecessor, taking place 30 years after the first film. I wouldn't say it's drastically different. It's kind of a continuation of the story, and it's trying to be a little bit different. It's not trying to do exactly what the first one did, because the first one was a one-off. I mean, once you've had that kind of crazy premise, you can't just redo it again. So this one kind of like takes it in a new direction and tries to also make it unexpectedly crazy. And I'll give it that. It added some elements that the average, normal, sane, and rational person wouldn't try to put these all in the same movie, even with the crazy stuff going on with the first one. But let's move on. August 21, 2019, 1 star. Completely fails to be entertaining. The jokes are hollow as their earth and extremely repetitive. The unique world would have potential, but doesn't let the viewer into it because of shallow action scenes all the time and really bad slapstick humor. The plot is very predictable and the dialogue boring and without any depth. Well, yeah, it's boring if the humor doesn't hit you right. Again, even slapstick humor, not everybody's into it. So it's just one of those things that your taste and your humorous taste is really going to affect how you see this film. It may be straight up garbage to one person, and another one might find this worth watching more than one time. 1.5 stars, August 14. How did this get made? The script is terrible. Oddly, the effects are pretty good, but it has drifted too far from the original Nazis take over the world storyline into a frankly dreadful film. Well, it had to go somewhere. It couldn't just give you more of the first one because it would be really boring. It had to do something wacky, and it did. 2.5 stars, July 28. Well, if you want to kill some time with cheap fun, okay, yeah, 2.5 stars, maybe. I still say 2 stars. I'm going to stick to that because I didn't laugh as much as I should have, so I'm just going to let it slide at 2 stars. 2 stars, July 22nd. I remember I saw the first film when it came out, and it was as expected, silly nonsense with a bit of fun. This film is in the exact same way, naturally, and it's surprisingly good compared to the first one. The story story is a mess. Nazis on the moon with a race trying to survive. Some dude comes and brings some stuff to save the dying leader, and when she eats it, she turns 50 years younger. And besides healing people, the stuff can run as fuel for ships, among other great things. Yeah, there's like another element that's put into this. There's the Nazis. Actually, the shape-shifting reptilians, which end up living, they have been living in the hollow earth the whole time for eons. They have access to this magical substance that keeps them young forever, and etc. And I won't go too far into it, but one of the characters that's kind of an old sick lady that she's a character that was in the first film. She eats this and is rejuvenated into a young girl again, and she's nice and healthy. And it's not the main point of this. It's just one of the wacky things thrown into the movie. And here we have the very last actual audience review, 5 stars, best sci-fi movie ever. I'll take that as a comedy. I won't take that as a serious audience review. But as expected, we only had 57 or so audience reviews. If that, there might have even been fewer than what was listed. So let's jump right on to IMDb. And we can see on IMDb we have like 113 reviews that we can check out. The one at the top, 6 out of 10, harsh reviews, March 5, 2019. After reading the other reviews and after seeing the movie at its Berlin premiere, I have to say I find those reviews a bit too harsh. Yes, it's probably not going to win an Oscar, but what do you expect when you read the story? I think it's a decent B movie, and there are certainly worse ways to spend 90 minutes of your life. I'll agree on that. Anybody that's had a trip to the dentist will agree with that. The CGI work is once again very impressive, and if you really want to criticize something, it's the dialogue, which can hardly be any more wooden at times. Yeah, the opening narrator, the girl's voice narrating at the beginning, it was cringeworthy bad to me, but none of the rest of the acting was. It was passable for what this was. And I'll say, yes, I agree with the CGI. The budget's there for the CGI. It looked pretty damn good. It looked better than it looked better than most every B movie out there. If they spared expenses on something, it wasn't spared on the effects. The effects look good. 6 out of 10 on that one. 5 out of 10. Meh, never summed up a film better. I gave the first Iron Sky a 8 out of 10. For a crazy plot, it somehow all worked really well. Good humor, some likable characters, and it felt cohesive. The sequel, on the other hand, feels a bit of a mess. You can see the potential for a better film, and it's pretty frustrating. The VFX for a $20 million budget is pretty good, but the plot is just ridiculous and not in a good way like its predecessor. Most of the characters were not funny and badly written. It doesn't make sense in really badly written ways that I feel could have been easily changed to make it a bit better than it was, and not so by the numbers with plot holes that take you away from immersion in the wacky world they're trying to represent. Personally, if I wrote this film, I would have taken it in an entirely different direction. All the pop culture references mostly didn't work as intended. Yeah, I'll agree with that. They kind of made fun of the cult of Apple fanboys, and Steve Jobs. They had a lot of focus on that, and it should have been a lot funnier than it was. And maybe it's even offensive to people that are really part of that Steve Jobs Apple cult. And let's be honest, there is a cult of Apple fanboys out there that no matter what kind of crap rehashed product Apple puts out, they'll just pay $2,000 right off the bat to get that damn worthless Apple product. And it's making fun of those people as a kind of cult and a religion. It does that a lot. Whoever wrote this script really doesn't like Apple fanboys. Let's leave it at that. 6 out of 10, not perfect, but better than Sharknado, any of them. I didn't expect much from a sequel to a movie about moon Nazis, but they really pulled out the stops on this one. The first movie had a lot of dull moments with interesting if campy scenarios that made it a watchable film, but not memorable. This time around, the acting, environment, special effects, and music all got much needed upgrades. With the exception of a needless subplot, I had fun with this and I didn't feel my eyes roll back even once in annoyance. It isn't a stellar movie, but it blows the doors off of any budget title or sci-fi channel dross. I'll kind of disagree with one thing on that. Again, I say the opening narration is cringeworthy bad. They should have redone that. But the rest of it I'll agree with. It was good enough to watch from front to back. Um, let's see, a 3 out of 10 stars. Remember, on IMDb, we're not on a 5-star system. We're on a 10-star system. So 3 out of 10 stars. Such a long wait and such a disappointment. The first Iron Sky took a great premise and injected it with great characters, witty dialogue, great action scenes, and fantastic special effects. So, ever since seeing it, I've eagerly anticipated the sequel. The Coming Race builds on the theories of Nazi esotericism and promises a lot. Unfortunately, it delivers very little. Virtually everything that made the first film what it was is entirely missing in this sequel. The characters are flat, even the characters reappearing from the original are flat. There's absolutely no humor in this film. I didn't laugh once, not once. The pacing is all over the shop, leading to what can only be described as a jumbled up mess. I don't completely agree with that. I think they really tried hard to take this film in a different direction. They didn't want to just rehash what they did in the first one because that would have been boring. They wanted to make it just as crazy and weird but different. And that's going to strike people wrong, people that expected straight up what they got in the first one. And I knew I wasn't going to get that, but I was just disappointed that I didn't laugh more. So I'll agree with that. The attempts at humor, they could have been better. I saw what they were trying to do, but I just didn't, feel like laughing out loud real hard. Again, if I had been drinking, maybe would have changed. But yeah, the humor, it just wasn't as great as I thought it would be. 3 out of 10 again, huge disappointment. The first Iron Sky movie was much better with a smaller budget. I loved Iron Sky 1 for what it was, a good sci-fi B movie with some very sarcastic and even intelligent political in-jokes. The sequel is a big disappointment, unfortunately, and to reiterate, I write this as someone who loves B movies, and I even donated some money for this sequel. Weak plot and no credible bad guy, jokes that simply don't work or are tired, jailbroken iPhones in 2019, coupled with wooden acting. However, I don't think the actors are to blame a lot given the weak script and plot they had to work with. Yes, some of the jokes seem dated, like the iPhone jokes, but there are others that also seem a few years dated. And I think that's because a review that I read earlier stated that this script had been written 3, 4, 5 years before this movie actually was released. So yeah, probably a lot of the jokes are a little bit too out of date, and you could really see it on the iPhone jokes, but you could still see what they were doing. They just didn't land quite as well because they were a little bit outdated. But yeah, you can tell that this movie was written just a few years before it was actually produced. They should have gone over it again and refreshed it a bit, but yeah, it's a weakness. I don't know why it was planned and written so far from the time that it was actually filmed. There's a story there, but I don't have time to get into it. 1 out of 10 stars. 7 years and 20 million budget wasted on a pile of garbage. To be fair, the first few minutes seem quite compelling. However, the film takes a huge nosedive soon after. Nothing makes any sense, especially in relation to the first film. It is a complete non sequitur. The saving grace of the first film, Iron Sky, the visual effects work. The plot was thin and the story was ropey, but the design of the spacecrafts and space battle scenes gave it a stylish look that could have been built upon with the sequel. Instead, in terms of the visual effects work, nothing really connects the first film with the sequel, and the style is lost. The director has thrown away the best parts of the first film and subsequently has no real platform to build upon. Yeah, I saw that on the Nazi moon base, like it didn't really completely square up with what we saw in the first film. That wasn't like the killing blow for this to me, though, making it rotten, but you could tell that it wasn't the same designer that they had on the Nazi moon base. You could tell by looking at it, but I don't think that was the fatal flaw in this. I think the flaw that gets this rotten is just that the humor doesn't land as well as the humor did in the first one. If it had, then all of this other nitpick stuff would have been pointless. The film would have been far better, and these would just be nitpicks, because that's what they really are, nitpicks. It's really, the flaw here is really the humor didn't land as hard as it should have. That's the big disappointment. Another 1 out of 10 stars. Jesus Christ, it's just awful. Loved the first one, seen it several times, cult classic, got a few people to check it out. This is so-called sequel. This one is utter garbage. I don't think I laughed, cheered, or smiled once. Seriously, wide berth. The script, the characters, the acting, it's all just terrible. Yeah, it's the humor. If the humor had landed, they wouldn't be calling it garbage. They wouldn't be finding other flaws either. 5 out of 10, barely decent. The original Iron Sky was way better, and I was a big fan of that amazing movie. Sadly, after all this waiting, the sequel is not so good. The plot is bad. Half the time I didn't know what the characters are trying to do or find or why. The effects are fine, I guess. I love the spaceship scenes, and the jokes are weird and miss most of the time. Yeah, most of the time they miss. You can see them, but they miss. It's not a spoiler to tell you what is missing. Yes, the trailers are misleading to a certain degree. There is no Jesus. Putin is there just to dance, and half of the scenes in the trailer are not in the movie. The characters have weak or no motivation at all, and most of the things that happen seem convenient for the plot. Yes, I'll agree. The trailer, they didn't put that in the movie. The trailer's kind of misleading. But you know what? I couldn't remember what the trailer showed. I have seen the trailer, but it was so long ago before I watched this. Between the time I watched the trailer and this, I had forgotten about the trailer completely. So other than Hitler on a T-Rex, I didn't know anything else or remember. So it didn't strike me as misleading. But yes, I'll agree. If you watch the trailer and then go right into the movie, yeah, it's going to be worse for you because it just promised stuff that you really didn't get a good look at. And yes, it's correct. There's a Putin Russian leader character, but he's not really figured in the plot at all. He's just kind of shown in an environment doing some funny stuff and very disconnected from the plot. I'm not sure why, because it led with him and then didn't go anywhere. It was just in a scene that didn't connect with everything else, but it was definitely Putin. In any case, you'll have to see it to actually appreciate it. 3 out of 10, huge disappointment. This was a must-see movie for me. Longtime fan of Star Wreck and Iron Sky. I had intentionally avoided seeing spoilers and reviews, but since there was almost no ads anywhere to tell that movie is out, I was skeptical that this is maybe not such an event as the first one was. Yeah, it's straight to Netflix, no limited theatrical release, so obviously it wasn't going to be as good as the first one, or you would have heard about it by now. I'm not entirely sure why the movie was so awful, but at least the story or just the script overall was so badly written that half the movie I had my mouth open. It's like the movie is a mix of scenes where there's plenty of actors and suddenly all the extras are missing in the next scene, which doesn't make any sense. There's no logic in some parts, and there's some very poor acting which ruins the mood or a joke. I guess all the budget went to special effects and not enough to the writers. I'll agree with that. There's definite problems with the writing. Again, the jokes seem a little bit out of date, and yeah, the plot could have been tighter. They could have connected the scene with Putin, but they didn't bother to. But then again, they would have had to increase the running time. So I don't know. I'm not, a real expert on how to create a movie like this. I don't have a lot of experience watching movies like this. But yeah, it doesn't live up to the first Iron Sky. This is going to be a very particular slice of people that appreciate this, that'll sit through it and get something out of it. I was one of those people, but I'm probably in the very small minority. 8 out of 10. Crazy story continues most enjoyable way. Even Iron Sky The Coming Race is a sequel for the first Iron Sky movie. It is easy to watch as an independent story. Screenwriting is so lazy or so crazy that it surely is not an art movie, and it doesn't have to be one. It is a crazy comedy and it will make you laugh. Silly ideas of human history as told a new way, and history of a mankind will be rewritten. Finally, we get some sense for the story of Adam and Eve. Story doesn't bow to any religion, old or new, but make them laughable as they originally should be. Christianity, Muslim, and irreligious are told and expressed the way they needed. Totally crazy way. Storytelling is very rapid, but because the silliness of the story, 1.5 hours is more than enough for this movie. Yeah, it feels very short. It could have been longer. It doesn't stop moving, like it doesn't become boring at all. The pace is quick. But yeah, they equally make fun of all religions that they can find the time to make fun of here. I don't know. This is going to be a very particular taste. Some people are going to appreciate this, but people that come into this expecting an improvement on the first movie and they're like really cult fanboys of the first movie, they're going to be kind of upset by this. But as a casual enjoyer of the first movie, not a fanboy, I found this enjoyable enough to watch one time. Let's continue on. 1 out of 10, total crap in all possible ways. I was a big fan of the first Iron Sky, mostly because of its humor and storyline that really worked in a weird but really funny way. In this movie, neither of them was there. Acting was not good either. Movie ticket wasted and 1.5 hours of my time wasted. Well, I disagree. You couldn't have actually wasted a movie ticket because this wasn't released in the theater, so I don't believe you. But yes, you're making my point. If you're a fanboy of the first one, you're going to be very upset by this. But casual viewers that enjoyed the first one, found humor in it, they may find humor in this, so it's not a total waste. 4 out of 10, so cheesy. 2 out of 10, not a worthy successor to the original. I enjoyed Iron Sky 2012 because of the seamless blending of reality and visual effects, as well as the original Nazis on the Moon concept and decent plot. However, I feel the latest entry doesn't hold up to those standards. Modern day moviegoers expect something more than the usual generic, politically correct fanfare as seen coming from Hollywood 24/7, and it's starting to show. My advice to Timo and his team would be not to fall into the same trap. Don't overcompensate with CGI due to the lack of a compelling story and plot, because the latter two elements is what makes a memorable film. Good visual effects should only be the icing on the cake. So this reviewer scolding the director, whose name is Timo, saying that he chose to play it safe and overcompensate with visual effects, I'm not so sure on that. I think it just needed a little bit better writing. I don't think there was an effort to try to hold back or play it safe. I don't know. It's just going to be a matter of personal taste. And like I said, fanboys of this, they are going to find everything to rip apart here. Fanboys of the original film, but casual viewers of the original film like me, I found this worth watching. 8 out of 10, worthy sequel, but not as good as the first film. Yeah, 1 out of 10, a letdown. 3 out of 10, tries to make everyone happy and is a mess. 2 out of 10, commendable special effects, mediocre script, and drowning in political correctness. I don't think it was drowning in political correctness. If it was, it sure as hell wouldn't have put Muhammad and the Pope in there. So I beg to differ on that one. 4 out of 10, bad taste and terrible circus. 8 out of 10, an amazing B movie, absolutely worth watching. And that is the key. You have to know that this is a B movie. You can't think this is a big Hollywood production that you're supposed to take it serious, or you're going to be like wondering what the hell you're watching. 10 out of 10. I saw the movie and I have to say that I'm surprised. Yeah, me too. I didn't expect the Hollow Earth stuff. 2 out of 10, not worth the time. 1 out of 10, with the exceptions, low after reviews. I was still let down by the movie. Okay. 1 out of 10, really, don't have much to say. 2 questions. First, really someone paid money to make this? Secondly, really someone paid money to watch this? I'm not sure how many people paid money to watch it because it came straight to Netflix. So if you're counting your Netflix subscription, well, then Netflix, the actual company Netflix, paid to have this. But as far as seeing this in the theater, no, this didn't get a theatrical release. 10 out of 10, funny and really entertaining. Why are there so many bad reviews? I really love the movie. It's fun. Yeah, because there's 2 kinds of people reviewing it that are not going to enjoy it. Those are hardcore fanboys of the first one that want just a rehash of the first one. And then the second group is people that were looking for a movie that was to be taken seriously, and this is not that type of movie. Everybody else, like the casual viewer of the first movie, like myself, I found it rather enjoyable. And I don't mean it's a great movie. I mean, I sat through it from beginning to end and didn't feel bored and didn't feel like shutting it off. So to me, that's not irredeemable. Now we have a 32% on the audience score. That could be fair. We have so few reviews. You have 53 user ratings. It could be fair. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. It's not enough to judge. but it feels okay to me. 29% on the tomato meter. So actually, the critics actually were enough on board with this to give it a 29. Well, I've reviewed movies on this program that are 0 and in the single digits that have much bigger budgets than this and bigger actors. So I'll say this is a success overall. I think the director actually had a success here. That's my feel on this. And I would actually give the third one a chance if there is a third one coming. And that's going to be my final verdict on this. So, just go into this knowing what you're going into is my final word. And I will see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.